Everyone in the galaxy thinks we humans are strange, foolish. But truth be told, they think our biggest weakness is our heart. Meet Corporal Hayes. Hayes was no highborn officer of the Central Vanguard. Burned skin mapped his jawline from a plasma breach on the outer rim. Dark, hollow craters had under his eyes from holding the front lines for 4 consecutive days without reinforcement. His hands always, well, they shook a little whenever he unbuckled his empty rifle magazine. He had just saved the planetary capital of Xylos from a massive orbital siege. He thought he'd receive a simple reward. A shiny metal medal. A few extra credits. Maybe a ticket back to Earth. But the reward was the alien princess. The elite commanders of the coalition laughed when the royal decree was read aloud in the grand pavilion. Their minds were small. They only saw a trap. To them, Princess Cynthia was a symbol of absolute danger. Her species was lethal. Her body was covered in deep, crimson scales that scraped together like rusted metal whenever she moved, and a wet, rhythmic clicking echoed from her mandibles. Her 4 eyes stared out like empty, bottomless pits. No alien warrior had ever survived her court, because she despised weakness and executed any shooter who showed even a flicker of fear. Hayes walked up the marble steps of the grand palace alone. Thick gray dust from the trenches still coated his heavy boots. His breath dragged heavy in his chest. His right hand still trembled from the exhaustion of the last war. But he did not turn back. He did not flinch. Princess Cynthia stood by the high obsidian throne, her sharp, clawed fingers resting on the hilt of a ceremonial energy blade. The air inside the room bit into his lungs like shards of glass. The sharp stench of ozone and burnt sulfur hung thick, suffocating and heavy. She looked down at Hayes' small, unarmored frame and hissed, expecting this human to drop to his knees and beg the High Council to change his prize. She expected him to cry for mercy like the rest. The hidden royal guards behind the pillars waited for the human to break. They thought he would drop his head. They thought he would run. But then, Hayes did something that turned the entire royal hall dead cold. He didn't run. He didn't pull a weapon. Instead, he unclasped his dented chest plate, let it drop to the floor with a loud metallic clang, and stepped right up to the base of her platform. His shaking hand became, suddenly, perfectly still. He wiped a streak of dark grease from his forehead, took a ragged, burning breath, and looked her straight in her 4 dark eyes. He didn't look at her like a terrifying monster. He looked at her like a partner who had just survived the same nightmare. He looked up at the towering princess and said, "Your Highness, I didn't fight that army out there for a crown, and I didn't do it to buy a slave. If you want to draw that blade, go ahead. But if we're going to share this reward, you need to know one thing. Humans don't bow to fear. We fight for the soul. And I see a warrior's soul in those eyes, not a prize." He stood his ground, completely ignoring the plasma spears pointed at his back by the stunned guards. Alien logic shattered right there on the floor. Cynthia's mandibles went completely still. Her crimson scales stopped rippling. For 3 centuries, every warrior given to her court had brought gold, treaties, or absolute terror. No one had ever just brought raw, unbroken respect. No one had ever dared to look past a lethal armor and speak to her as an equal. Later, the galaxy learned that the reward didn't break the human soldier. It broke the Empire's oldest cycle of isolation. Cynthia didn't execute him. She dismissed her guards and walked down the steps to stand beside him, realizing that for the first time in her life, she had found someone whose spirit was as unbreakable as her own. When the remnants of the enemy fleet returned weeks later, Hayes and the princess led the counterattack side by side, proving that humans don't care how dangerous the reward is. They just stand by the ones who earn their respect. The aliens still sit in their high towers, texting, trying to find political logic behind why a supreme royal bloodline would choose a rough human grunt. But truth is, humans are just built different. The night is getting late. So, what do you think? We humans really are strange, aren't we?